Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started because we want to do a little something fun at the beginning. And we don't want to run out of time. So, welcome to the Abundantly Crescent session. And we promise we will have lots of demos. And as long as you promise me that when you fill out the evaluations, you will say that the demos were not boring. So we put too many demos in, and everybody says, there are too many demos. If there are not enough demos, everybody says, oh, it was full of slides. So trying to strike a balance. We will have 4 demos. We're going to do like kind of 2 towards the beginning and then 2 towards the end. And they're hopefully going to show you different functionalities of Crescent. But before we go ahead and do that, I have a couple of nice prizes that the marketing team has put together. I want to know how many of you use Power Pivot today? All right. So those of you who use Power Pivot, do 2 people want to volunteer and tell us what your usage of Power Pivot is and how it's kind of changed your organization? Right there. Can you grab the microphone? Oh, excellent.
We're using Power Pivot in our business intelligence class, our data analytics class, and we use it to show how we can do the slicers and dicers, and we want to show them how we can use it for data visualization.
Very cool. Thank you very much. And come up here and grab your prize. One more volunteer in the back in the white. Thank you.
I'm Shashank, and I work for Microsoft Online Services team.
You don't qualify. You can go ahead and tell your example, but you're not getting a prize.
So what we do is we scan all the servers in the PPOS environments, and we look for patches, vulnerabilities that needs to be remediated, and we use that data in the Power Pivot to expose the data in different ways, the charts, bar charts, etc., and give that to the service teams who do the patching and etc.
Thank you very much for sharing that example. Okay, I'll take one more. Right there.
How's it going? My name is Dave Feldman. I work for Raytheon, done an interesting solution actually using TFS data that I figured I'd share with folks. Pulling in the date dimension from the TFS analysis services cube as well as the work items to be able to relate the 2 of them with a DAX query so that you can do trend over time on how you're doing on bugs. Be able to capture that at a month, quarter, whatever you need to do level.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Dave. You want to come up and grab your prize? There will be more opportunities. Thank you. Okay. So how many of you came from my last session? Oh, a lot of you. Okay. Great. All right. So the objective of this session is to figure out, to tell you all what Crescent is, and some of this is going to overlap with what we talked about in the last session. We're going to learn about Crescent's key capabilities, show you more of what the application does and how it does it. We'll talk a little bit about the architecture and the requirements, and we're definitely going to have fun with data. So the 4 demos we're going to show you are actually real data sets. And you're going to tell that because it won't be quite as pretty as the demos you've probably seen so far, because they're real, right? Real data isn't always as nice and clean as data that we make up, right? So we'll do that. And for those of you who were not in my last session, I'm going to apologize again for my voice. I've got a cough, and so if I cough during the session, I really apologize. I know that's kind of not great, but I'll do the best I can. All right, so we'll start off with a little overview of Microsoft Business Intelligence, just to set the foundation. And you all are probably fairly familiar with this diagram. At the bottom, we have all the different types of data sources that we like to look at. Really databases, SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, Dynamics, line of business applications, and now lots of OData feeds out there. On top of that, we have basically our data platform, and it's the most widely deployed data platform in the world. And that includes all the capabilities that come with SQL Server on top of the relational database, right? We have analysis services, integration services, reporting services, and master data services are the main offerings that are included in the SQL Server box and part of the SQL Server offering. And specifically with SQL Server 2008 R2. And we also have the most broadly deployed and used production tools. This is all about Office, right? Excel workbooks, SharePoint for collaboration, SharePoint for scorecards and dashboards, and Power Pivot applications. So this is really the breadth and the scope of Microsoft Business Intelligence. It's not just about one product. It's really about the integration of the entire BI stack, all the way from the bottom, having a great platform for data, all the way up to the end user tools, and having your end users work in an environment that they're fairly familiar with, which is Microsoft Office. And SharePoint. All right, I covered this a little bit in the last session also. But basically, these are the tenets of the next release of SQL Server Denali. On the left-hand side, you have mission critical platform. This is all about high availability, scalability, mission critical, everything you need for mission critical. And that includes data warehousing. There's a ton of new capabilities we have around data warehousing, being able to build data warehouses to scale, having an appliance around data warehouse. And then there's some new also capabilities around really fast in-memory indexes in SQL Server and coming in the next release. And that's codename Apollo, that project codename Apollo. In the middle, we have developer and IT productivity. These are all about the tools and the ways, the applications we make and ship out of the box to make it really easy for you as an IT professional or a developer to be productive. So all of our management tools inside of Visual Studio, the different more flexible, innovative application types that you can build now, and basically allow you to lower your time to deployment as well as your overall cost of development. And then on the right-hand side is pervasive insight, and this is where we're going to spend pretty much all of our time today. And this is about BI and our vision for BI, which has been the same for the last 15, some odd years that we've been in this space. And that's all about BI for the masses. And we're not just trying to bring BI to a certain number of people in the organization. We're trying to enable anybody to be able to access and use data. And everybody needs that now, right? We all have data that we need to consume, we need to make sense of in order to make all of our decisions. And we do that both with the right end user tools for the right scenarios, as well as really great improvements in our engine. And specifically, we're talking about the Vertipack engine here. And that's the new engine that comes with analysis services. It's the next version of the engine that shipped with SQL Server 2008 R2, right? We covered all of this in the last session. We looked at all the different key investments we're making for Denali. And those three investments are Crescent, which is the focus of this session today, as well as end user alerting, which we talked about. This is all about the ability for end users, as they're viewing reports, to be able to set some rules and receive a notification when the rules are met for that data. So, for example, I was telling the story that I receive a whole ton of reports every day. And basically, they come in email. I get somewhere between 20 and 25 of them every single morning. Right? And they tell me all about what the developers are working on, what bugs there are in the system, what projects are going on, updates to sustained engineering, bugs that we're tracking, customer issues that we're tracking. And what I really want to know out of those is usually when there's a change in the trend or the number of issues that are coming in. So I want to be able, as an end user, to look at one of those reports and say, I need to know when that number gets bigger than 50, or I need to know when those responses get less than 20. So I can go ahead and use end user alerting to easily create those rules and receive notifications for when those conditions are met, so I don't have to look through every single report every day. Another investment we're making there is the Excel and Word renderers in the 2007 and 2010 formats. If you use reporting services today, you know that we generate Excel and Word output in the 2003 format, and we're updating that to the 2007, 2010 formats. The goal of that is not to break anything. Everything should look exactly the same. There should be no backwards compatibility issues, but you should get the new format, right? and you get compression, you get the new number of rows that are supported in Excel. But essentially, we want you to try it out with the next CTP, make sure that there are no regressions, and that your output looks the same in the new formats as the old one. And then the last pillar is increasing efficiency, specifically around our SharePoint integration. So we're investing heavily in making reporting services a native SharePoint shared service so that you can manage all of SharePoint reporting services all together. It's all in one UI where it used to be separated into the reporting tools, the reporting services configuration tool, the SharePoint configuration tool. You went to central admin to do some things, and you had to go to Management Studio to do some other things. That's all in the same place now, and the reporting service runs as a native SharePoint shared service. So those are the 3 major investment areas. I just want to review them really quickly, and we'll move on to Crescent. So Crescent is all about, and this is our vision statement for Crescent, it's an interactive data exploration and visual presentation experience. So it's really all about the way that users interact with data, right? They want it right away. They want to be able to not have to think about, how to write SQL, how to write whatever other language queries, and think about how to lay things out on the page. They want an answer, and they want to be able to get to that answer really quickly, and then be able to share that answer with other people. Okay. This is an overview slide of basically the core tenets of Crescent. In terms of the visual design experience, we make it really easy. It's to use, and that's one of the main tenets of Crescent. It's web-based. It's a Silverlight application. It runs all in the web. Doesn't require an install other than the browser in Silverlight. It's designed after Microsoft Office paradigms. It's actually designed at the intersection of PowerPoint and Excel. So the way that Excel handles data and the way that PowerPoint handles laying things out on the canvas. And that's all about being able to present it. That PowerPoint paradigm around presentation is very important. It's metadata driven, and all of that metadata comes from PowerPivot. So if lots of you have used PowerPivot, this is the next generation of the PowerPivot tools. And some of the feedback, obviously, because PowerPivot was a V1 in 2008 R2, it had some limited capabilities in terms of what it could express. Things like properties or KPIs or hierarchies, and a lot of the actual metadata that Crescent also uses around what are the default fields for this particular table, what's the formatting for this field. All of that capability is being added to PowerPivot so that it can be a really great metadata model for Crescent and for reporting using other tools like Excel. That metadata gives us the ability to create and have interactivity out of the box because we understand how everything is related in the model. We understand the queries that we're generating on the page, and we just basically understand what we've created so we can offer users interactivity without having them spend a ton of time trying to set up and say, this table that I've created is related to this table by this property, and have that take a lot of time. And the last one is presentation ready at all times. Crescent is designed for the screen. And we had some questions about this in the last session. But it's all about being able to interactively share that presentation on the screen. So it's designed to be projected. It's designed for all the data that you have to fit on the screen. And if not, then you can interact with it to show the data that you want. Okay? This is actually a poster that sits outside my office. And it's seasonal. We change it pretty much every season. We haven't done one for spring yet, but this is the winter one. These are the design tenets that we have for Crescent. And this is what we hammer into the developers as they're thinking about how we're going to design it, as well as the PMs, as we're going through and designing the different features of Crescent. We went about this in a very different way than traditional reporting services, right? Traditional reporting services is really great as a platform because, and I quote, this is coming from a user, I can do anything in reporting services. There's always a workaround. I can always write code to make it do whatever I want and drive reporting services, right? That's one of the big powers of having a report platform that's very flexible. That also makes it very hard for end users sometimes, right? So when we went and designed Crescent, we said we're going to take a completely different take on a reporting tool. We're going to have one way to do things. We're going to make everything accessible within 1 or 2 clicks, right? If the user isn't able to do what they're thinking of doing in 1 or 2 clicks, we're not going to put it into the product until we can figure out how they can do it in 1 or 2 clicks. Every task is done in context. That means you see everything that's happening, you interact with the data right there, and everything happens on the canvas, right? There's no other place you have to go through. One of the things that makes it hard to demo is there's no advanced mode. There's no tips and tricks, right? You do everything, and it works the way that you want it to work right out of the box. Less is more. We're not trying to cram in every single little feature for how to manipulate the title of a chart, for example. We're going to create it by default. You can place it, but there's basically the right default by default. So we're going to pick what we believe is the right thing to do. We're going to do it for the user. They can have some ways to manipulate it, but hopefully we make the right choices out of the box. Easy for the user and hard on us. One of the greatest examples of that is interactivity, right? It is really hard to set up and have a user define that when I click on this column chart, it's going to filter this bar chart. Or when I click on this line over here, it's going to highlight something over there. And the user doesn't have to do that. We generate all of that logic out of the box, and we handle all of that for the user. And that's hard. That's pretty hard on us. There's a lot of code that is there to do those kinds of operations. But it makes it really easy for the user to not have to interrupt their train of thought, to set up something in the application, to do something that feels very natural to them. And then the last point is, it's got to be performant, right? We constantly push the AS team. Whenever we see something that's slow, we say, you got to go and figure out how to make that faster. Because the user's thinking about a question, they're following a train of thought, and we don't want to interrupt them with waiting. You don't want to click on a button in an interactive application and then walk away to get coffee, right? That totally breaks your train of thought. It doesn't help you understand the data. So performance is really, really important to us. So these are the tenets. And I'll go ahead and start the demos. And I'll do 2 up front. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit about architecture. And then we'll come up and Sean will come up and do a couple more. Oh, let me switch over. So I was really glad that there was something flying out there. I was really glad that the first example that was given was an education example. Because the first demo I'm going to give you is an education data set. And like I said, all the demos we're doing today are real data sets that we've gotten basically from our field. And this one is a public school demo. That's data from a public school data set. So, let me go back. One of the things we didn't cover in the last session was how you launch Crescent. So Crescent is integrated into SharePoint, and it's enabled through the SharePoint UI. So it only works in reporting services in SharePoint integrated mode. Okay? There are 2 ways that you can launch Crescent. There are actually a couple of ways you can access it. But if you create a Power Pivot gallery, and you have workbooks that contain Power Pivot models, you can launch Crescent from there. And that's this button right here. And you can go ahead and do that. Or in the next version of Power Pivot, you'll be able to save those models to a server and be able to point at that so that you can scale up, do the 2 billion rows or more that Amir showed in the keynote yesterday. So if I go ahead and show you this data source definition, you'll see that there's a new data source type for reporting services. It's called the Microsoft Business Intelligence Semantic Model. And you can go ahead and define basically a regular connection string to that data source. In this case, I have stored credentials, and I'm telling it to use credentials as Windows credentials. You can set some of the other options too. Okay? The other way you can do is actually you can create another type of connection. And that is, let me go to shared documents and look at the document. You can also create a BISM file connection. And that's another type of connection that's directly for analysis services that you can use to define a connection to the AS database. The difference between the 2 types of connections is the BISM connection doesn't allow you to do Windows, right, integrated? Windows stored credentials, sorry, because analysis services doesn't have the notion of stored credentials today. So if you'd like to do stored credentials, reporting services handles that, and you can create an RSDS so that you can define stored credentials, which is exactly what I did in this data source that I showed you previously that had the stored credentials in it. Okay? So I've got education. I'm going to go ahead and launch Crescent again. And you can see it's running in the browser. It's a Silverlight application, like I said. You can see all the browser Chrome. And on the right-hand side is the information, the model that I have to work with. And you can see that this data set is about, I'm going to F11 so I can get some more room, absences and behaviors in primary school. Okay? So this is, let me go ahead and show you. So I have basically, let's go ahead and do school first. I'm going to click on school, and that's going to go ahead and give me some information about the schools. And you can see there's, high schools show up first, and there's different ones of them. There's actually this blank school at the top, and there's some data that's not well associated. So what I can do is get rid of that. Let me add title first. So what we didn't show you before is there's this filter area that you can enable, and that creates a little pane that you can drop stuff into, and you can go ahead and filter things out. So if I want the school name, and I don't want it to be blank, I can go ahead and put that in and say, show me all of them except the blank one. Okay? So that's really easy to do, and now I get the non-blank schools. Okay? So this data set, like I said, is actually about behaviors. So let's go ahead and look at some of the different types of behaviors we can see. Let's go ahead and actually see how many students are enrolled by which type of, by grade. So if I come up here and I'll select grade level, and there's a grade name, and then I'll come down and grab the enrollment count of students enrolled per grade. And this data actually has data for several years, so it's the aggregate across multiple years, but the trend is basically the same, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and get the column chart. And you can see we have grades 0 through 13. One of the schools has 13. And I actually don't know what these other codes mean, but there's an EC code that has a lot of students, which is surprising. So I'm not sure what that is, but maybe some of you who are teachers out there can figure that out. Let me go ahead and I'm going to copy this chart. And of course, you can copy paste. And Silverlight will ask you if, because we're in a Silverlight sandbox, whether or not you want to give access to the clipboard to Silverlight. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to add the behavior information. So there's absence information and behavior information. Let's go see what absences look like. So we'll look at the count of absences instead of the count of enrolled students. And let's go ahead and copy and paste that again. And let's also look at the count of behaviors. So behavior, and there's a count of behaviors down here. Let's go ahead and do the last one as count of behaviors. So right away, you can really easily tell some interesting things about this data, right? Let me go ahead and filter out some of these grades too. So I'm not going to want them here later. Grade name, and drag and drop that here like I did before. And select all except the ones down here. And I'm going to leave in the EC ones just because there's so many of them. But that makes it really easy for me to compare the different grades. And a lot of our enrollment is in elementary school, right? But we have behavior problems starting in about the 6th grade. Before that, it's pretty flat. And absences have almost the exact same trend. Those students seem to get a little bit better as they get older, right? The behaviors start dropping in high school. The enrollment also starts dropping. That's unfortunate, but not quite as much as the behaviors do. So one of the interesting things we can do is also look at the gender breakout of the students. So let's go ahead and add gender to each of these charts. And you can see what the breakdown is of the genders. And you can tell I'm not dragging and dropping anything down here. This is where you can control, fine-grained control what's happening on the screen. But I don't need to because the automatic behavior is good, right? It's what I expect. I want to see the breakout of each of these things by gender. So let me go ahead and add that to that one. And it's actually easier to see the trends of these things by line. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to a line and change this to a line. So pretty easily you can start seeing the trends. There's not much difference between the boys and the girls in terms of the number of enrolled. It's kind of like half and half. And in terms of absences, not much difference either, right? But you can tell the behavior is very different. Right? Boys get in trouble a heck of a lot more often than girls do. But you can see that the peak actually happens for both of them around the 9th grade. Right? The 9th grade, something about the 9th grade. Kids get in trouble a lot then. All right, so let's dig a little bit deeper into what's going on in terms of the types of behaviors. I'll get rid of the absence information, and we'll look at the behaviors themselves. So first thing I want to do is look at the behavior by the behavior type, right? So actually, I'm going to get rid of this one too. So I'll look at the event, and I'll look at the event description, right? And there's some really pretty good items here, right? A lot of things that cause bad behavior. So let's go ahead and look at the count of the behaviors by that. And I'll turn that into a bar chart. But you can actually see that most of the behaviors get dropped off into several of the big buckets. That's probably a data problem, right? People are going through, and it's kind of like selecting miscellaneous because it's easy. This is a data problem we really need to fix, right? We've got all these behaviors. We have all these buckets that capture the behavior information, but basically only 3 of them are being used, and they're called disobedient and detrimental behavior. What's the difference between those two? I don't know, right? Or other code violations. That's really not that helpful in understanding the actual behavior information. All right, so let's also go look at the location where these things happen. So I'll grab the behavior location, and we'll look at the behaviors by location. And all the normal places that you think would happen show up. And I actually was surprised that there aren't more of these in other places. Most bad behaviors happen in the classroom and in some place called unknown, right? It's another data problem. We really should figure out what unknown is so we can spread it across and actually get a good idea of where these behaviors are happening. The other thing you can also do is look at the, for violence, there's actually some really interesting, let me see if I can find it, the weapon type. So let's go ahead and look and see how many types of weapons get used. Unfortunately, the numbers went down by a lot, right? You saw that? The chart got a little bit, hopefully a little bit smaller. Oh, what happened? Unknown. I filter out the unknown. Okay, let's filter out the unknown. They're just too big in the weapons description. The unknowns are kind of killing everything else in terms of the number. So let's do not unknown. There we go. Okay, so that tells you some idea of kind of what the breakdown is of the behaviors. Dangerous weapons, that's what we're looking at, right? There are about, 800 of those in our district in the last, this is 5 years of data, right? And let's see, the pink ones we can compare across the different places. But looks like spring-loaded guns are probably number 1. Oh, no, this is a pocket knife. Pocket knives are number 1. So it's really, like I said, really easy to kind of compare different pieces of the information. And as I'm highlighting here, it's actually showing me the contribution of that. If I want to compare pocket knife across the different locations, I can just go ahead and click there, and it'll highlight pocket knives everywhere, or pellet guns, right? So really easy automatic behavior to kind of see what's going on. One of the things I may also want to do, and I'm going to get rid of this filter, is look across different schools and compare the different behaviors across schools. So let's go ahead and grab school again. And one of the things that because we designed for the screen, we have to make the most of screen real estate, right? We really need to make sure we have good ways to navigate large amounts of data all at once. And one of the really great ways to do that is with a visualization we call tiles. And I'm going to change this into a card because I'm going to want it to look that way later. So I'm going to change it to a tile. And what a tile does is it allows me to navigate each school separately, right? And I actually want to grab just the high schools. So we can just focus on high school behavior right now. And that is, I did figure this out, is where did it go? ELA type, school type. And I can just select high school, and it'll limit to just the high schools. All right, so this little card here, now I have this really cool visualization shell, right? I've got a container where I can navigate each individual school. And I've got a little card that's going to give me the high-level information about the school. And I can add fields to this card just by selecting the card and then adding some more whatever stuff I want in the card. So if I want to add the SPF school number, because that's an important number for me, I can go ahead and do that. And I can add the SPF school name. It might be the same school name. Yeah, so that's actually the code for the name. So I can add whatever I want to the card to give me the high-level information about that school. Then I can start adding things inside of the container, like I did a little bit before, to get information specific to that school. So let's go ahead and look at the breakout of time. Let's go look at time. We'll grab the school year. There's a ton of information about time here. And the one that I want is the school year information. And I can look at basically the number of absences across the different school years. And I can also go ahead and change this to a column chart. And show it by gender again. And what I'm doing is I'm just setting up some information so that I can compare the schools to each other. Oh, that's not good. This is pre-shipping code. I was going to warn you that that might happen, but I was hoping it wasn't. All right. Let's do that again. Yeah. All right. I'll just go faster this time. All right, schools and tiles. Tiles. Oh, shoot. Okay, so let's add filters. And I at least want to get rid of I want to look at high schools. School type right there. Okay, and grab high school. Okay, so back to where kind of I was. And let's grab the school years again. Oh, it's thinking real hard. That's not a good sign. Okay, so let's grab the school year, time. The school year. Okay, grab the number of absences and behavior. And grab the student gender. Oh, let's go ahead and change that. All right, so let's grab gender now. And hope it doesn't do the same error again. Yay. And we'll make that into a little line. And then let's go ahead and copy and paste that. and look at the behaviors. Yes, please. Remember my answer. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and change that one to be the number of behavior problems. And I can really easily do that just by dragging and dropping and replacing the count of absences with the count of behaviors. Okay, so I've got this trend for this particular school, and as I'm going through, I can compare that to any of the other schools, right? And you'll see that this one is Pine High School, has 2,000 behaviors and lots of absences, right? And you can see the trend is very different. Our behaviors haven't changed, even though our absences have gotten better over time. If you compare that to the first one, you'll see that there were only 60 instances of behaviors at Ash Charter School, and the absences are much smaller, okay? Now, when I'm scrolling through, it's kind of hard for me to compare what the different counts are and how different they are from school to school. So what I might want to do is go ahead and change the axes so that when I'm flipping through, I get the same axis for each of the different schools. So the way that I do that is I come up here and I say I'm going to lock the axes. So I can decide I want the same axis for all the tiles, the x-axis, the y-axis, or both. So I can go ahead and lock both of them. And that should cause this one to jump down a lot, right? Because it doesn't have a lot of most of the behaviors. But now as I'm going through, I can go ahead and compare that to Pine School. And you can see that most of the behaviors are here. And you can see none of the axis doesn't change as I'm going through in the different schools. And this one I didn't lock, so you can see the lines are jumping a lot. So that's one of the really great things about being able to navigate a lot of data using tiles, and also being able to compare data as you're going from page to page by locking the different axes on the page, okay? So that's education. The next example I'm going to show you, let's go ahead and go back. I actually didn't want to refresh, I want to go back. Any questions about those features? Basically, I showed you some basic charts and tiles and, yeah, Yeah, that's a good question. Sorting. We're actually coding up sorting right now. It's just not done. So everything is automatically sorted, and you will be able to control sorting, but you can't do it right now. Okay, so let's go back. And let's go ahead and look at another data set. And we'll look at oil and gas this time. And this is, again, real data that came from the field. And we actually showed this to a couple of the we've been in a couple of what we call executive briefings, where we showed it to some of the companies that actually are in this industry. And it was really interesting to have them explain the data to us, because we didn't know it very well, just like with the education data. So let me go ahead and oil and gas. So the first thing about oil and gas is there's a really strict hierarchy of data here. There's business units. And we'll go ahead and look at business units first, right? And that gives me a little table like normal. I can add whatever fields I want to business units, and I showed you a little bit of that. But you can also add measures, right? So I want to see for each business unit the actual amount, the variance percentage from actual, and the forecast amount. So if I wanted to move fields around, I can come down here to the Field Explorer and go ahead and change that. I didn't like the automatic layout, because I clicked them, it was in the order that I clicked them, but I actually want to lay them out. Actual next to forecast, and then some variance amount. So that's the business units. There are 3 of them in our corporation. There's the Gulf Coast, the Rockies, and San Joaquin. And then down here, underneath business units, we have what we call asset name. And assets are basically divisions within the business unit, right? So I can go ahead and look for each asset, the amount of production that we have in oil and gas, and the actual production, and go ahead and change that to a column chart. And the interesting thing is there are actually different products. When you're drilling, you don't just get oil just because you're going after oil. Doesn't mean that you're going to get oil. In fact, when you drill for oil, you get a lot of oil, gas, and a lot of water, right? So water comes up when you drill too. So you can see that here. You can see the distribution of the different products that we get when we were drilling. And let's go ahead and look at that. Let's do that over time too. So I can look at the years, and I can look at the volume of the actual production by year. And we'll also grab product. And I'm going to go ahead and change that into a column chart. And you'll see I got exactly what I wanted. I wanted years on the bottom. I wanted production. And I want to break down by oil and gas also. Okay? So you can see production has been pretty good over the, pretty steady over the years that we have. And a lot of it, as you can see, one of the great things about interactivity is always interactive, even when you don't intend it to be. I can come here and I can actually click on this slice, right? This is where most of our production is. And it doesn't look good. This is our best producing area, the shelf area. And you can see production has declined since probably 2003, right? So that's not a good sign. We should probably take a look at what's going on there. But you get interactivity. It's not just at the oil and gas level. I can do that and obviously get gas. But I can also look at individual slices. So I can say for the water that we have, for example, show me where the water's coming from in 2010. And I can see that slice, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So what about number formatting? The best place to do number formatting is actually in the model, because you don't want to have to do it every time, right? And you can specify in the model. It's just not specified in this particular model. But if your model designer doesn't specify number formatting, then we want to have a way later to be able to specify it when you're creating the report. But the best place to do anything that you're going to do over and over again is in the model, so your users don't have to do it every time they create a report. Yeah, top N, good question. Not really. So if you want a strict top N, that's not supported yet. That's definitely on the list of things we'd like to do, but it's not there yet. All right, so let's go ahead and look a little bit at the oil and gas down here. And let's look at the kind of the variance over the different production that we have. So I have years right now. I've got oil and gas. What I really want to do is see it by asset name, because that was the most interesting thing, right? So I'm going to go ahead and drag asset name and replace year with asset name. And I don't have to start from scratch. I can just do that. I'm going to go ahead and filter out and just look at, let's just look at gas production, for example. So let's grab product, and I'm going to go ahead and do this and say I want to look at just gas. If you actually want to type in a value, you can actually turn the card over. So if clicking on the little boxes gets too tedious, that wasn't the right box. I can go ahead and do this, and I can then type in, say I want something that contains or doesn't contain or begins with. That's all based on data type, and you can go ahead and say, well, I want it to contain gas, something like that. But in this case, my filter is pretty straightforward, so I can just do the checkbox. Okay? Yep. A context menu? Is there a concept of a context menu? We had this discussion with the Office team. We told them we were going to create an application that has no pop-ups and no context menus, because we didn't need them. And they were like, what? You got to be kidding. Well, everything we do is through the context menu. And we said, well, if we need everything to be done through a context menu or a pop-up, then we've failed in what we've wanted, which is for everything to be immediate, for the user to always see the data, and for everything to be within 1 or 2 clicks. Okay? All right, so I have this, and I'm going to go ahead and change this to a, and I won't be too much longer. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to, just in case some of you haven't seen it. Let's go ahead and design. And everything lands on the page as a table, as you saw, and then I can change it to a scatter, for example. So this is going to give me the actual production, and I want to compare that to the variance, right? So I'll do go ahead and do that. And, not that one, average percent, this one. And I'm going to give it a size with a forecast amount. And then I want to add labels, right? So I can go ahead and come in here and say I want to see labels centered or above or left or right. And I can also go ahead and add a month across time. Oh, I don't want to do months. I want to actually do quarters. There's actually a lot of data here. Oh, look what it did. That's fantastic. Now I'm seeing every year because that's what I checked, and it's showing me a breakout. But that's actually not what I wanted real quickly. So let's remove that, and let's remove quarter. That's just me clicking too fast. So I actually want to put quarter on the play axis. And Sean's going to show you some of that other stuff later. So I'm going to start playing this over time, and we're going to see what happens to some of this data. And you see Shelf is our biggest producer. You see the funny zigzag it's doing? So we're like, what the heck is going on with that? And we showed it to one of the oil executives, and he's like, oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. I've never thought of it that way. But production of oil and gas is seasonal. So every quarter, every year, quarters are very different. And because of storms, specific quarters, you always produce less. So you get this little funny bouncing thing. And that's just natural. It's really interesting. So I can also add trackers. You've seen some of that, and that pauses it. And then I can go ahead and add it. So again, interesting thing is we've got great production up through the first couple of years, and then it starts dropping, right? This is our biggest producer. And the production is definitely, the trend is definitely moving to the left, which is not what we want, okay? So some really interesting insights in the oil and gas data also. Some more questions before I move on to the slides? Yep. Can I change the chart titles? Not yet, but we're working on that too. Yeah, we auto-generate the titles now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so is there inventory being maintained so that you can see what's going on? Yeah, actually, Sean's going to show you some of that. So we'll see that in 2 demos from now. Let's go ahead and go back to the slides real quick. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, oh, they're going to not like me if I do it from here. So let me go ahead and change it back to A. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the architecture before we get back to some more of the features. The way that this works, like I said, is it's all in SharePoint integrated mode in terms of how you launch the experience, okay? The Crescent client is a Silverlight client. It's over here on the left. There are 2 ways you can get data that Crescent can talk to. You can either have a Power Pivot model that sits in Excel, and you publish that model to SharePoint, and you launch it from there. Or you can create in BIDS a model that you can publish to the AS server, and then all your data is cached on the AS server. There's actually also a mode where you can create a model and have it pass through your queries to SQL Server Relational. And that's with a feature called Direct Query. So if you want to not cache the data and you want to pass through to SQL Server Relational, you can do that too. Now, when you do that, what you're going to want to do is make sure it's really, really, really fast, right? Caching is going to be fast. Running queries against a relational engine isn't always going to be fast. So if you're going to do that, the best recommendation is to build Apollo indexes. Okay? Those are vertical column store indexes that are based on the exact same technology as Vertipack. In fact, it's the same code, but it sits in SQL Server Relational in a new type of index for SQL Server Relational. That's going to make Crescent run well enough against relational so that you can have pass-through without caching. Okay? Uh-huh. Yeah, Silverlight has a desktop experience. We don't work that way for Crescent right now. It's got to be connected, and basically all of the heavy processing is actually happening on the server. And one of the things we haven't talked about, I didn't quite show you, is we only fetch the data that the user is actually looking at. So the user can click on sales, and it can be a 2 billion row table, and we will only fetch the first section, the first number of rows that the user is actually physically looking at. And we'll go back and only fetch more data if the user asks for it, right? So this is the #1 complaint that you administrators have about ad hoc reporting. You get your users, you give them access to data, and the first thing they do is try to bring back all the sales, right? And it's running on the server, it's trying to pull 2 billion rows back to the user. We don't do that. We only show the user exactly the data that they're looking at. We will only bring it back to the desktop if the user has requested to physically view that data, either by scrolling to it or aggregating it in some way. Okay? Yep.
This is based on OLAP data, or can be, so does it have a write-back capability?
Oh, it's based on OLAP data. Does it have write back? It doesn't have write back now. So a good question. Okay?
It's based on Power
It is based on Power Pivot. If you want to do write back, you should use Power Pivot to do it, right? So Power Pivot allows you to munge data from multiple places. You can collect it. You can add to the data and augment it in Excel directly, right? And you can add your data there. Okay? Yeah. Can you deploy the models to do the PowerShell? Yeah, I think you can. I'd have to double check that. Can you deploy models through PowerShell? Do we allow any regular documents to be deployed? Oh, SharePoint has APIs to allow you to do that. You don't have to use RS PowerShell to do that. Yeah, so you can use PowerShell from SharePoint to do that. Yes, we're back. Is there any plans allowed outside of SharePoint? So I apologize for that in the last session. And, basically, we think it's really important that all the BI assets end up in the same place, and that place is SharePoint. Okay? When you publish an Excel workbook to SharePoint, you get Excel services. When you publish reporting services reports to SharePoint, you get reporting services in SharePoint mode. So we want all the assets to end up in SharePoint. So a lot of the new capabilities that we have are targeted at SharePoint as the front end. Okay? Yep. Really good question. So is it Silverlight 4 or Silverlight 5? Right now it's Silverlight 4, and it will be Silverlight 4 for the next public CTP. Likely we will have a requirement on Silverlight 5 because we asked them to fix some things for us, and we want those fixes. So by the time we release, we'll likely be Silverlight 5. Okay? I can almost guarantee that. Mm-hmm. Sorry? I can't hear you, so maybe you can ask after. Hmm? Oh, can it work in claim space? Yeah, there's some tricky stuff you have to do to set it up so it works with the AS on the back end, and you can follow up with some of the details after. I'm sorry, follow up after. Ask that question later, okay? All right. One more slide, because we got a couple more demos to do, and I'll answer some more questions. A lot of questions come up with, is this going to replace Report Builder and BIDS, right? No, it's not. It's a complementary solution, right? There are many different types of reporting. There's operational reporting that you want to have full control, pixel perfect. I want this to be exactly the way that I created it, look and feel. And I want to have full control over programmability. I want to be able to add things to it that are third party. All of that is targeted at BIDS and Report Builder, okay? Crescent is ad hoc. It's all about finding insights to your data by allowing your end users to kind of manipulate and play with it. But we're not going to give you every widget that you ever had in Report Builder and BIDS to control every single property that we have in RDL. That's by design, right? We're going to do the right things by default, but that means we're not going to expose a lot of the little widgets that you have to set through a property pane or set through a dialog. We're just not going to do that. We're going to make it really easy for the users to do ad hoc reporting. And you have the other tools. We're going to continue to support them. We're going to make them even better in the next releases so that they can really cover a range of reporting, not just one or two scenarios. Okay? So there are 3 tools. There will be 3 tools in Denali. There will be 3 tools moving forward, and they really meet different needs. We don't want to be slamming everything into the same tool that's not optimized for any of the different scenarios. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk about performance point. Report Crescent is not any of these. Okay? There are many different reasons for you to use the rest of the reporting the rest of the Microsoft BI stack, right? If you want to do scorecarding and you want to do balanced scorecarding, you should use Performance Point, right? They've got all the metadata that's tailored for that specific solution. You want to do forecasting and write back and all of that. You want to do that somewhere else. Crescent is not for that. It's basically for data exploration and presentation. We're going to move it forward in that direction. We're going to add lots of features in that direction. But it's not meant for some of these other scenarios. And we have other tools at Microsoft that do this. And they're specialized for this, right? It's like one of the analogies we like to use is we have Word, we have PowerPoint, we have OneNote. In all of those tools, you can do the same basic things, but they're targeted at different scenarios, right? If you want to build a list, you can build a bulleted list in Word. You can build a bulleted list in PowerPoint. You can build a bulleted list in OneNote. But they're for different reasons, and they have different specializations so that they can really meet the needs of the person and the scenario that it's being targeted at. That's the same thing for report builders, same thing for bids, same thing for the other tools at Microsoft. We're not trying to slam everything together into one big tool that does everything. We want to have the same common basic capabilities across all the tools and then be able to differentiate them for the different roles and scenarios that you want to use them in. Yeah? That immediate nature. Can you create widgets? So you want to be able to plug in your own widgets into Crescent? Yeah. That's actually a request that we've gotten from our partners, even our internal partners. We don't think we'll be able to do that in the first release, but it's something that we've heard, and we'll continue to work on it. Okay, so let me get Sean up here to show you a little more, and then we'll answer some more questions. We've got a little bit of time.
All right, am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can definitely hear myself. That's good. All right. Did you switch me?
I did.
All right. So we're going to look at two demos here today. The first one is on flight data from 2009. And the second one is the scenario that the gentleman over there mentioned earlier around how are people using the Power Pivot system, right? So, and a little bit of that was shown actually in the keynote yesterday morning, where Amir demonstrated some of those capabilities in that session. So I just want to first show you a couple things here. This is my Power Pivot workbook. It contains 6.5 million records. These are all the flights from 2009. And I actually checked before the session to see if there were any flights that went from building A to building C here, but there are not. I couldn't find any, so there's a business opportunity for somebody, clearly. But I've saved this workbook up to SharePoint, and now we can build reports on it. And I'm a little bit of a weather buff, so what I did is I wanted to take a look at weather delays by state. So over here on the right, I've got my model. Is there a question? No? Okay, it's just echo. No? All right. So I've got I have all my flights here, as well as some dimensions by dates, origins, destinations. And I want to create a scatter plot that shows, by state, how many flights there are and how many of them are delayed by the weather. So I'm just going to click on 2009 flights. I'm going to scroll down to find the delayed by weather percentage and the year-to-date flight count. Right, you can see I've got 6.45 million records, basically, that I'm aggregating right here on the fly in the browser, thanks to, obviously, to the server technologies that we have underneath. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a scatter plot, and it's not going to be too terribly interesting right away. We have 1 point, right? I'm going to resize it a little bit. And then I'm going to add the states, because I want to see, how do they do by different states. So I'm going to add origin state. There we go. And this will fill out, right? And I can go ahead and add data labels, put them on top. Well, we'll just say above, right? And right away, we can already see some things here. Like number one, California has a lot of flights, but they typically don't have to deal with any weather issues, right? Which kind of makes sense. States like Illinois and New York and New Jersey, they have more weather issues, and they also have a lot of flights. Now, if I want to look at this data over time, the percent of total, I can't on the fly. I'd have to go put that into the model. So, and there's a reason why I showed it this one direction, because I want to make the bubbles do a certain thing. So we'll get there in a second. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I want to look at this over time. So I'm going to grab month for my date dimension, drag it down to play axis. Now I could just click on it. Sometimes I just sort of get in the habit of dragging it. So you'll see that I'll do that as well. And then I'll just go ahead and play this over time, right? And you'll see some different jolts in the data here. Like, for example, obviously this last frame is December. And you don't have to have full bubbles in order to do the traces on the charts as well. And you can see in Illinois, you actually have two sort of spikes. One is obviously January, and then there's a little bit of a fluctuation, and then December. And that's because typically in Illinois you're going to be dealing with snow, right, and snowstorms, and that's January, December timeframe. But there's another bubble up here for California, and you notice that over time there isn't really much of a fluctuation because the weather's just kind of generally nice in California. So that's one way we can look at this data. And next I'm going to look at it with a slightly different a different view, but basically the same data. So again, I'm going to look at the delayed by weather percentage, and I'm going to look at it by month name, and I'm going to turn it into a line chart. All right. Notice I didn't have to actually use the field well this time. I just clicked on the fields. Everything came back nice in the format that I expected. Convert it to a chart. And you'll notice right away, again, here's January and here's December. And there's two spikes there that represent the winter months. But there's also a spike in here, which is sort of representative of springtime and thunderstorms and things of that nature. So I want to drill into that a little bit more and understand a little bit, if my hypothesis around that is correct. So the one thing that I know is that thunderstorms happen in the afternoon, and snowstorms are kind of time independent. They just roll in, hit the state, and it could be AM or PM. So I'm going to click on a dimension in here that I have, or entity in here that I have for hour of day, and I'm just going to add AM or PM and see what happens. All right. So you notice a couple things. First of all, I've got some blanks, so let's get rid of the blanks. They get in the way. There we go. I'll collapse that back down. And you'll notice a couple things here. Number one, you still have these spikes on the ends that represent winter. And in the middle, though, there's this really big variation between the AM and the PM. And that sort of reinforces this notion that I have that there's thunderstorm activity in the afternoon, because that's when thunderstorms typically fire off. And so there's a spike there for the PM data. And again, if I just want to look at the PM, I can highlight that, highlight the AM values as well. And I'm going to go ahead and expand that out because there's some additional stuff I want to do with this data. So I know that weather is often kind of geography dependent, and I want to further confirm whether AM or PM are, the thing that's kind of driving the thunderstorms and the snow. So I'm going to look at this data by state, right? And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to state and click on origin state name. And instead of putting everything in the single chart, what we actually do is we create a set of multiple charts, right? And you can see by default, we created a 3x3 grid of charts. And if I want to create, more objects on the grid, I can just go up here just like you would do in Word with a table or whatnot and select, 5x4 charts, right? These are going to take a second to fill out. There we go. And then right away, you'll notice a few things, right? Some of the same trends that we saw before. California, Arizona, and Hawaii, all very flat, have flat lines because they just don't have very many weather issues to deal with. Illinois and Iowa have this sort of dual hockey stick, notion where the AM and PM lines are very close to each other in the winter because that's, when it snows. And then you have states like Florida, right, that have this big hump in the middle of the year that is reflective of the afternoon thunderstorms that hit, right? So it's just very easy for me here. Notice I didn't have to click any property pages. I didn't have to go to a context menu. I just clicked on the fields. It automatically created the right visualization for me, and I learned something in the process around weather and flights. So that's the first demo. We're doing on time. The put boxes around them? Oh, yes. Yeah, so we're not done with the visual design of how they're going to look. That's how they look for the public CTP, but we are actually iterating on the design. So a lot of the visuals that you see here, they're going to get tweaked a little bit, well, actually pretty significantly as we move towards release. All right. So this next demo, are we doing pretty good time-wise? Okay. Power Pivot, oh, sorry, question? Name sets.
That's a good question, and it supports some of them. Hierarchies, not yet. So hierarchies is something that's being added to Power Pivot in this release, and we have plans for what we want to do with it, but we don't think we're going to get it done on this side, right? Because some of the things we have to do is we're working with an engine, changes to an engine and the end user experience. So we have to wait for the engine stuff to get done first, and they just finished hierarchies. So we don't think we're going to have time to add them to the end user experience before this release, but certainly that's something we'll do later. That's another good question. So, is it only work against the? It only works against the new BI semantic model, and there is the traditional, what used to be called the UDM, right? UDM models. Now, those are going to be both BI semantic models, but there are two ways to look at the BI semantic model and build it. One is the multidimensional way, which is what used to be UDM, and one is the relational way. So Vertibac underneath the covers is a very relational model, and you can interact with them, both of those types of models, in different ways. The AS team is looking at what's going to take to allow Crescent to run off of a traditional model, or how we might be able to migrate those to something that Crescent can understand. We don't exactly know when and where those will fall out, but certainly that's being looked at. Okay?
All right. So again, what we have here is information about how people are using the system, the workbooks that you have in Power Pivot. When you save the workbooks up to SharePoint and the users interact with them, all of that data gets saved into Power Pivot, right? And so we have a Power Pivot management workbook. And here I'm actually building a Crescent report against that Power Pivot management workbook. Now, I've started off by filtering out a couple things that are going to skew the data a little bit. But I just want to show you, really how easy it is to build these interactive reports. And hopefully you've seen over the last 3 demos just really how easy it is to build these things. So the first thing I'm interested in is I want to look at the query length, which is either quick, expected, long, or exceeded, right? This is how long the queries took, and there's a definition for each of those. And the query count by each of those. Query count. Actually, first I want to look at it by day of week as well, so I want to grab that.
Yeah, so this is an answer to the question that you had earlier about what kinds of metadata is captured about Crescent reports. This is the metadata that's captured about Crescent reports, okay? Captured on the server.
And I'm going to look at the query counts. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a chart. Oh, I got these flipped. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one here. And I'm going to go grab day of week. Again. There we go. All right. Oh, I know what the problem is. I filtered them all out. I wanted the opposite of that. There we go. All right, so get rid of Sunday, because nobody works on Sunday. Well, actually, people do in this data set, but they skew things a little bit. So here are the different query lengths. Notice I filtered out trivial, because if I put in trivial, it totally just skews the data, because thankfully, most of the queries come back super, super quick. So this is just a sum of query count by these different items. I can go ahead again and I can filter, interactively work with the chart to see how the contributions of each of these stacks. Okay. And now I want to see how the servers are actually impacted by these query loads. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this chart to get started. Control C. I'm probably going to get the Silverlight warning. Nope, that's good because I already did it once. There we go. Move it up here. And instead of looking at the query lengths, I just want to look at the server loads. So I got to go look at the AS instances, analysis services instances I've got, my servers chart. And I'm going to look at it by machine name. And instead of using a stack chart here, I'm going to use a cluster chart. So I'm just going to switch over here. Bang, right, just like that. And again, this view is completely interactive, right? Because of the relationships that we have in the model if I select this one machine name, I can see the contributions to how the query links occurred. I could click on this one here and see that as well. I can even click on the individual bars and see what happens on those days of week, right? So I can see on Saturday, I've got a lot of quick queries, and on Thursday, what this one is here, it's got not as many queries on Thursday, and that's reflected obviously in the chart to the left. So almost done. Right now, if I were building this report and not explaining to you how I'm building it along the way, I could literally probably build this report in close to a minute and a half, right? So it's that quick to be able to get these interactive views of the data up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and paste one more time. All right. Make this one a little bit bigger. And now I want to look at this data by hour of the day. Right? So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick, where's my hour? Time. And I'm going to put this on, let's see here, hold on just a second. Make sure I get this right. I'm interested in hour of day. I'll turn this into a line chart first. Okay. And let's look at hour of day. Put that on the axis, actually. Okay. And then I want to put the day of the week on the multiple. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm looking at, and let's look at CPU usage instead, actually, right? So this is how easy this is to change. So I'm just going to go up here, instead of looking at the query counts, switch to CPU usage. So that's what I'm really interested in on the servers in this case. So let me go to, where'd it go? Health. So we'll look at CPU usage percent. All right. And we'll look at CPU usage percent in this chart as well. Just drag it down, changes the chart. In this case, I want the average, so I'm going to grab the average here. Grab the average here. Really easy to change, right? And so now I've got this multiple down here that represents the day of week and the CPU spikes on each of the machines. And so if I want to filter this data again by one of these machine instances, I can just click on the Power Pivot instance, and you'll notice again it still filters the chart or highlights the chart on the left, and it also filters the data on the bottom chart. And if I pick a particular day of week, like on a particular machine, say Saturday, the blue machine, right? It now filters the multiple down below to just show Saturday, and it also highlights the stack of data that is here that represents Saturday for the different query links. So, think about how, if you were to try to build this application, you'd have to do a lot of work. You'd have to do all the plumbing to make everything connected to each other. But really, all we did here was just drag and drop. How many property pages? There were 0 property pages, right? And everything was connected. We understand the relationships in the model, and it's just super easy to build these things. And so that's what I've got. There you go. Yeah. All right. Question?
Can you create like multiple pages so you can
Yeah, that's a good question. Multiple pages. Yes, Ricardo's actually written the spec for that. He's sitting in the front right here, and we're trying to figure out when we're going to get it done. We're not exactly sure if it's going to make the first release, but certainly it's been designed. Right here. Yeah, if there's a description in the BI semantic layer, will you see that? Yeah, there's actually a story for that too, and that is going to make it. I'm going to make sure it makes it because it didn't make it last time. And it's really important, right? You got to, because your end users need to understand the data, you got to get the description in. So yes, there is a description, and it will show up in the field well.
Animate, the story he mentioned how he's telling a story of creating. Can I say record what I'm doing? I'm going to highlight on this thing, and this thing, and this thing, and then so I can share that with end users so they can see the story that I'm really trying to tell.
Yeah, the question is, can we auto-record the actions so that you can walk someone through that? Not yet. That's a great, great feature. And Silverlight is so good at playing animations. It's so tempting, isn't it? Yeah, we'd love to do something like that. We don't think we're going to get to it. We're trying to get the basics in and work from there. Yep. I'm sorry? Mobile platforms, another thing that we are actively looking at planning. Not exactly sure when it's going to happen, but that is work that we are looking at right now. There was a question back there. Yep. Yep, it's a good question. So security is different whether you have an Excel spreadsheet or you have an analysis services data source, okay? If all the data is in an Excel spreadsheet and it's in a Power Pivot model in an Excel spreadsheet, you can only secure the entire data set and give people either yes or no on that data set, right? If it's in an analysis services server and it's running on the server, you can get row-level security. So you can define who has access to exactly which rows in the database. So as a DBA, you want your data set to be on an analysis services server so you can define row-level security and decide who gets to see what parts of the data. Okay? Yep. Yeah. Is there a class on building the models? There are actually 2 sessions about building models at TechEd. And there's one tomorrow, Julie Strauss's session, and it's all about how to build models for Crescent. It is, I'll look it up. Come ask me afterwards. But it is tomorrow. It's Julie Strauss. She's the speaker. There's a question up here first. Will it work with SharePoint 2007? No. It's SharePoint 2010 and above. Yeah. Uh-huh. Can you export them? That's a really good question. Right now, no. So reporting services is really good at exporting to lots of different formats with the report definition language. There's obviously a lot of code behind that export. And with Crescent, we are using RDL underneath the covers, but there's a lot of extensions to RDL that we're adding for things like multiples, for things like bands. And we probably won't have time to add all of those to the export formats and be able to get the translation of those things in the export formats.
Does that mean you have to start the ad hoc reporting over again?
Oh, no.
Or is it just you save it?
Yeah. So I guess we didn't show saving. So when you create a report, you can save. You don't have to start over. You can save the report to SharePoint. You can run it in different modes. Let me go ahead and show that to you while we're here. Yeah, you can save. It's not just temporary. I actually have a whole bunch of reports that are saved on this machine, and I'll show you one of the education ones that we talked about. It's already saved to SharePoint, and when you click on it, your users can actually come in and just click on a report and view it. So if you don't want them to edit the report, well, if they're not going to edit the report because they don't need that functionality, and when you run the report, it'll just show up in what we call preview mode, okay? And this is a big report, so it's going to take a second to run. And this is very similar to the one that I built before, and they can just interact with it. You can actually decide whether you want to enable the user to have the filter pane. So the filter pane is turned on when you're editing and you save the report. It'll actually be turned on also for a user who comes in to view the report, and they can actually manipulate the filters. Okay? If you don't want that, then you turn the filter pane off, and when they come in to look at the report, then they just see the report. They can interact with it, but they can't change the filters. Okay? Uh-huh. Yeah.
So this one as the accessing the report control, is that using SharePoint privileges?
Yeah, so for the privileges, yes, this is just reporting services in SharePoint integrated mode. So all the privileges are SharePoint privileges. You set the privilege in SharePoint, and then our privileges map to the SharePoint privileges. Okay, so before everybody leaves, I want to really thank you for your time today. Remember to fill out your evaluations. And thanks. If you didn't get one of those cubes at the beginning, I have 2 questions for those of you who are remaining. And if you still want one, you can go down and play the game. Go ask Sabrina if she has any more buttons so you can sign up to play the game. And it's a really cool prize that you get. So my question, and I'll take 2 volunteers, is how do you think Crescent's going to change what your organization can do? Right there. You can come right up and you can speak in front of everybody. We'll use my microphone. Let me take this off. And then we'll take some more questions too.
I work for Willis Re. It's a reinsurance company, global, and one of the big things that my area works in is analytics, and I can see a huge benefit with Crescent for the end user to take the data and come up with different answers in a quick, short period of time, like total insured value or average annual loss of the data that comes in from the clients. So I see it as a huge end user answer.
Thank you. All right. Okay, I'll take one more. One more. Right there in the brown.
Hi, I'm Nick Cross from the UK. We're using Power Pivot already, and we've seen quite a big difference. We've created some stuff, and we've created indexes that we've then used, moved over to the data warehouse, and users are starting to use it. This is going to take it to the next level for us. Stop them asking the silly questions, and come back and say, yeah, this is it's kind of what I hoped it was last year, but it's now, and I can't wait for it to happen.
Good, we're moving in the right direction. That's good to hear.
Unfortunately, I missed the CPT.
All right. Thank you very much, and feel free to come up and ask questions, or a whole bunch of our team is down in the booth, so if you don't catch us right now and something comes to you later, come and visit us in the booth. Thanks.